المفروض العنصر ده ايه؟ عن false flag on Syrian chemical weapons. ايه اللي بيحصل في سوريا؟
Christoph, New York Times, but let's get right to chemical weapons because no one has done more research on discovered the truth about this than you have. Give us a little bit of your background with respect to what you have already reported.
Okay. So هو باحث. Alright. وباحث في عمل أبحاث كثيرة في الأسلحة الكيماوية. ماشي.
Now reporting about a false flag.
Well, first of all, thank you just for having me and for asking about this story, which has gone grossly undercovered by our corporate media. So I appreciate you shining a light on it. The top headlines.
الميديا ما غطتش الكلام دلوقتي. هو عمل الأبحاث بتاعته والقاضي بيحاول يشد الضوء على البحث بتاع الأسلحة النووية مع المتعلقة بسوريا.
I have for you reporting is that the world's top chemical weapons watchdog, the OPCW, Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, after years and years and years of a prolonged cover-up scandal, they've now finally admitted to concealing a critical finding that undermined allegations of a Syrian government chemical attack in Duma in April 2018. And the allegation that Syria did commit this chemical attack is what prompted the first Trump administration to launch airstrikes on Syria. And now years later, the top chemical weapons watchdog, the OPCW, has admitted that they covered up a critical finding. And this comes out of a cover-up scandal that's been unfolding at the OPCW for a very long time. So just to back up, April 2018, images are released of dozens of dead bodies in Duma, Syria. And there's gas canisters, and the insurgents who control Duma at the time, fighting to topple the Assad government, they claim this was a chemical attack. And before the OPCW can get on the ground to investigate, the Trump administration says, yes, this was a chemical attack, and we're going to bomb Syria. And they do that along with the UK and France. And if you recall at the time...
Okay. So احنا راجعين ل 2018 لما قالوا إن في ضرب كيماوي النظام الأسد عمل ضرب كيماوي. قال لك ترامب ساعتها برضو نظام إدارة ترامب قال لك قبل ما حد يروح يفتش قال لك اوكي في ضرب كيماوي بناء على المؤسسه اللي معنيه بتفتيش التفتيش على الكيماوي.
Syria. He did it at least twice. The media praised him after attacking him so much. Whenever he bombed Syria, there's a famous clip of Brian Williams of NBC News saying what a beautiful sight it is to see U.S. aircraft carriers bombing Syria, and even quoted a Leonard Cohen song falsely about what a great sight it was to see Syria being bombed by the U.S. So the OPCW, after the bombing, goes in, they do an investigation, and about a year later, in March 2019, they come out with a report aligning with the Trump administration, saying that the evidence does point to a chemical attack in Syria, and the inference of the report is that this was by the government, and the weapon used was chlorine. So the OPCW, after the bombing, goes in, they do an investigation, and about a year later, in March 2019, they come out with a report aligning with the Trump administration, saying that the evidence does point to a chemical attack in Syria, and the inference of the report is that this was by the government, and the weapon used was chlorine. But then we get a series of leaks from inside the
chlorine السلاح الأساسي ماشي.
And it shows that the actual investigators who went to Syria to do the investigation for the OPCW reached a different conclusion. And the evidence that they uncovered points to a false flag by insurgents. And this is contained in all these leaked documents, including an original report that was buried. And critically, for our purposes here, one of the most critical pieces of evidence was that the OPCW went to Germany to consult with a group of German military toxicologists who said immediately that there's no way this was a chlorine gas attack because that was the alleged weapon used. According to the Trump administration, this was a chlorine gas attack. And the German military toxicologists looked at the victim's symptoms and they reported circumstances of death and said there's no way that this was chlorine. The symptoms, including foaming at the mouth, looked like it came from nerve agents. But the problem is, the OPCW, when they went to the scene, there was no traces of nerve agents at the scene. So there's no evidence of a nerve agent attack.
Okay. احنا دخلنا في ملف الأسلحة الكيماوية ورحنا روسيا ورحنا الضرب اللي حصل بسوريا والشعب اللي هناك في 18. قال لك التحقيقات جابت انه لما راحوا يتكونسلت يستشيروا ألمانيا بسبب غامض بيستشيروا ألمانيا عشان ألمانيا تقول لهم الجثث دي مش مضروبة بالكلورين، الجثث دي ضربت بإيه؟ بأسلحة الأعصاب.
And there was a chlorine gas attack, which pointed then to this being a false flag, this incident being staged, and we don't know how all those people died. That's essentially.
اوكي احنا قلنا قبل كده فولس فلاج لما حد تاني يلبسها لك، صح؟ انسرج ايا كان مين حد تاني هيكون مين يعني، انه يلبسك يعمل هو العمله وبعدين يقول حد تاني اللي عملها يعني الاسد هو اللي عملها والتقارير جابت يعني الاسد طلع بريء ولا في اسلحه كيماويه دلوقتي بنتكلم عنها. بقول لكم هي في اسلحه كيماويه تيجي تفشخ لك اعصابك.
The German military toxicologists concluded. The OPCW suppressed that finding, erased any trace of it. It was mentioned in the initial report that was written by the original team. That got suppressed. And when the OPCW came out with its public report on the matter, not only did they erase the German military toxicologists' conclusions, they even erased the fact that the German military toxicologists were consulted. So in a detailed mission timeline of the mission, you have all these steps, being listed. Like the team did this, the team met with these people, the team met with these experts.
ومسحوا الكونسلتيشن اللي عملوها يعني كل الدلائل المختصين في ألمانيا طلعوها، مسحوا ان هم قابلوا ألمانيا ولا كلموها ولا هي اتدخلت في الموضوع ده اصلا ما كانها.
The Germans were totally erased, and the reason is obvious, because if the Germans' findings were included, it would have undermined the official narrative. This was a chlorine gas attack. So, long story short, one of the dissenting inspectors named Brendan Whelan, who challenged the suppression of German military toxicologists, he was vilified by the OPCW in public because they couldn't respond to his actual claims. So they accused him of a confidentiality breach, which he didn't do. So he took the OPCW recently to a tribunal, which adjudicates disputes at organizations like the OPCW. And in the course of the case that was adjudicated, the OPCW, in trying to make a fake case against Dr. Whelan, they inadvertently admitted that they suppressed the German military toxicologist finding. And that's what I've just reported, that in their submissions trying to make the case against Whelan, they tried to impugn him for...
احنا ليه بنتكلم دلوقتي عن الجيش الألماني التوكسيكولوجيست اللي في الجيش الألماني والتقارير بتاعته اللي اتمسحت والقضية اللي عملوها على الشخص اللي قالها. ليه رايحين الساعة من 5 ساعات ليه رايحين هناك؟ ليه رايحين لألمانيا وليه رايحين للأسلحة الكيماوية؟
Military toxicologists and saying that he shouldn't have raised the issue because, as they said, it was highly protected information that was not included publicly. So they admitted that this highly protected finding that undermined the official narrative was buried. And that's what just happened in his case, which, by the way, he also won. And the OPCW was forced to pay him damages for falsely impugning him for breaches. So it's a victory for him and a victory for the truth, but way after the fact, because the damage has been done.
So who actually killed these people? Who administered some sort of a chemical that resulted in their horrific deaths? And how many people did Trump kill with his bombings?
Well, I don't know how these people died. I just know something horrific happened because you had dozens of dead bodies, and it's been...
أنا حد عنده معلومات عن سوريا في 2018 والناس اتقتلت ازاي؟ هم دلوقتي يقول لك الحقيقة طلعت بس احنا مش عارفين مين اللي عملها بتاع، بس كان ذريعة لترامب انه يدك سوريا.
If you compare the photos, what happened was, releasing the photos, they moved the bodies around to stage some emotional scenes. So bodies are all of a sudden in one room and then they're in another room, and they were two corpses were placed next to each other and made to look as if they were engaged in a final embrace before they died. And this was done.
قال لك برضه عالميا ساعتها بقى حاولوا يغيروا الجثث، جابوا شكل الجثث بشكل يعني عاطفي عشان يشد العاطفة العالمية، صح؟ التصوير والتصوير الحرب وسردية الحرب وتصوير الحرب والليلة دي، فجابوا جثتين قدام بعض على أساس إنهم كانوا بيحضنوا بعض، ودي آخر لحظة يشوفوا بعض فيها يعني. أوكي.
To trigger outrage to justify a military attack by the U.S. Because recall, the reason Trump bombed Syria is because Obama, when he was in office, heavily called the so-called red line, which basically said that we're not going to bomb Syria unless there's a chemical attack.
So, I read about that. حيدر كنت كاتب عن الموضوع ده من فترة وجيزة جدا 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 ونسيتها خالص. الخط الأحمر بتاع أوباما اللي حتى الخط الأحمر السوري قال لك في خط أحمر هنا من ضرب سوريا، في خط أحمر. إيه الخط الأحمر؟ مش هنضرب غير لو فعلا تحمل أسلحة نووية كيماوية وبتستخدمها.
Even if you knew nothing about all the circumstances of all these cases and all the details of the leaked documents, just logically, the notion that Syria, under Assad, would go ahead and do the one thing that they know would invite U.S. military strikes, it never made any sense. There's an article in Harper's Magazine by Charles Glass, a veteran
مش فاهم يعني دلوقتي الأسد كان كويس وما بيموتش شعبه وما بيسممهمش بالكيميائية والأسلحة الكيماوية والليلة الأسد جري على روسيا ليه؟
Who quoted a former U.S. diplomat who told him the red line was an open invitation to a false flag. Because if you're insurgents fighting to topple Assad and you need U.S. military strikes to help you out.
وقال لك خلي بالك الخط الأحمر اللي المفروض ترامب بايدن كان عامله عزم الفالس فلاج، عزم الآخرين اللي هو خط أحمر، أوكي هنكسر لك الخط الأحمر ونقول لك حد اللي عمل فلان اللي عمل الكونكشن مثلا.
And you know the one thing that will get the U.S. involved is a chemical attack, then you have the incentive to stage one and have a false flag. So
weren't the insurgents to a large extent supported and paid for by MI6 and CIA? Could America's fingerprints be on this in some respect?
Certainly the insurgency, which was led by Al-Qaeda, and there are a lot of different groups, but certainly the insurgency was led by Al-Qaeda. It absolutely was funded by the CIA and their allies. The militia that controlled Duma at the time of the stage incident was called Jaish al-Islam. A lot of the funding came from Saudi Arabia. But the overall dirty war was coordinated by the CIA. And so you had various actors stepping in to pay different groups. And certainly MI6's fingerprints are all over this too, because a group that was critical to putting out the images from Duma and even was caught staging a hospital scene.
في ضرب جاي على السعودية دلوقتي بقى ضرب سياسي أو ضرب إعلامي.
Where they came in and hosed people down and claimed that they were all victims of a chemical attack when they weren't, was the White Helmets. And the White Helmets was directly funded by the UK and the US, and in fact, the White Helmets were created by former British intelligence operatives. A Western security company called ARC literally founded the Syrian White Helmets, and they were used to push a lot of interventionist propaganda.
I wonder if the not clean-shaven, but Brooks Brothers-clad president of Syria knows anything about this.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it was his insurgency that was behind these false flags, and there's in all the major cases.
Okay, so Golani, كويس أنا مش هو كنت عمالة كلها مع الفيديو اللي فات جبت سيرته مش فاهمة سبحان الله ما علينا. الجولاني كان هو الواجهة بتاعت والMI 6 والCIA كانت هي اللي بتدرب وما اعرفش مين هو اللي بيدفع بيمول، فقال لك كان عناصر كتير بتلعب في سوريا يعني. بس في ضغط دلوقتي على السعودية، اللي طالع دلوقتي ان في ضغط على السعودية بالطريقة.
For evidence, there's evidence of a false flag. You know, all the major ones that prompted either U.S. military strikes under Trump or under Obama almost led to them. So, for example, in the first major incident, Bucha 2013, this is when Obama was about to bomb Syria, but then he pulled back. The public story was that he pulled back because he didn't have the congressional authorization, which is true. He went to Congress to ask for it, but Congress didn't want to be involved, so he didn't do it. But what actually happened was James Clapper went to him, and this came out later, as always happens, the critical disclosures always come after the fact, and this was no exception. James Clapper, his director of national intelligence, came to Obama and said, the evidence that Assad did this is not a slam dunk. And that was a deliberate reference to the Iraq WMD hoax. Right. George Tenet said.
هو الموضوع بتاع الحرب العراق عمالة تتعاد في كل حتة. يعني عشان نفتح ملف دلوقتي سوريا والسعودية لسبب غامض وألمانيا الثلاثة دول بنجيب المعرض بتاع اللي حصل اللي هو الخدعة اللي هو يكتبوا تقارير كدابة وبعدين يطلعوها وياخدوا إذن من الكونجرس يعمل عملية عسكرية أو لأ أو يحطوا خط أحمر. فالخط أحمر مين بقى اللي هيعمله؟ المخابرات اللي هتعمله. ما في عمليات تانية بتبقى يعني ومين اللي بينفذه؟ العناصر التانية اللي هي بيجيبوها بيدفعوا لهم. مين اللي بيدفع لهم؟ يعني إذا كانت السعودية دلوقتي أو النباس. Ouch.
The case of Saddam's WMDs is a slam dunk. So that was a warning to Obama that this was another Iraq WMDs, and there's so many other.
Okay.
Yeah.
So اللي ظاهر دلوقتي ابتزاز السعودية.
For that phrase, either you reported it.
ونوع من أنواع مش خوف بس something about الجيش الألماني.
Recounted it, but I do recall the play on words from George Tenet. The Robert Kagan article in the Atlantic, which Max Blumenthal says is the imperial elite lamenting a setback for their goals, nevertheless is harshly critical of Trump and his military planners, about as harsh but using sweeter language as McGregor and Ritter have even been.
It is because people like Kagan, who's a diehard neocon, they're frustrated that Trump has screwed this up. They've been dreaming about regime change in Iran for decades,
right?
And Trump screwed it up by not bothering to make a case to the American people, changing their rationales. And they're frustrated about it. This has been a huge strategic defeat for the U.S. The New York Times just reported the other day about leaked U.S. intelligence assessments saying that Iran maintains substantial missile capabilities despite the Trump administration's claims, especially around the Strait of Hormuz, which gives them the leverage that they can use to prevent Trump from relaunching this war. So this is a disaster. If you're a neocon who's been dreaming about regime change in Tehran for nearly 50 years. Trump screwed it up. So Robert Kagan is expressing the frustration that comes from that. And there was a congressional hearing the other day where I saw Lindsey Graham expressing similar frustrations at Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, because contrary to the administration's claims that they've wiped out Iran's capabilities and so forth, leaked U.S. intelligence assessments are saying the opposite. And so all the neocons who have been dreaming about this forever are really upset. But to quote Trump, as Trump told Zelensky in the Oval Office, he doesn't have the cards because Iran using the leverage it has over the Strait of Hormuz, and it can threaten the U.S.'s Gulf allies, and has shown that it's willing to do that, and in fact has threatened even more damage that they've already received. So Trump's in a bind. He can't resume the war because he can't win it. He can't have regime change. That's been made clear. But he also isn't capable of making a peace deal with Iran because of the entrenched hostility in his circle towards Iran's sovereignty. And, minimally serious diplomacy with Iran would require recognizing Iran's minimal rights, including its right to enrich uranium. Trump can't do that either. So he's stuck, and people like Robert Kagan are expressing the frustration that results.
You mentioned Senator Graham expressing frustration. We have it. It's a little humorous.
Why are we going to Syria? وعمل ايه دلوقتي في السعودية؟ ده في ضغط على السعودية جدا جامد قوي. انت مش هتيجي بالكده، هتيجي بالكده. مش that's man. يعني مش وقته خالص ان انا يعني مش توقيت مش but في puzzle في ألمانيا وضغط obviously ابتزاز دلوقتي في السعودية.
He's so frustrated, it's laughable, but it's very interesting to watch him trying to cut off his buddy Pete Hegseth. Chris?
Pakistan. Are you aware of reports that Pakistan...
مش قادر أخ إبراهيم ده يمكن أفكر في حاجة تانية جديدة بس مش قادر.
And are allowing their bases to be used to park Iranian aircraft.
ده بغض النظر عن الأخضر أهو ثانية واحدة أبيض فأخضر فأبيض فأخضر إيه إشمعنى بتتكلم على باكستان وحاطط الأخضر وراك؟ أصلا مش صدفة يعني.
General King?
So I've seen one report on that.
Was it accurate?
So I think based on the variety of classification matter.
Let me just say, do you agree if it is accurate, that is sort of inconsistent with being a peace mediator?
So I wouldn't want to comment on that based on the ongoing negotiations.
Secretary Hegseth, if the mediator is allowing reconnaissance aircraft of Iran to be parked in Pakistani air bases, do you think that's consistent with being a fair mediator?
I wouldn't want to get in the middle of these negotiations.
Yeah, I do. I want to get in the middle of these negotiations. I don't trust Pakistan as far as I can throw them. If they actually do have a range...
As far as I can throw them, he did say that. I'm a sexual Pakistan, okay.
Aircraft parked in Pakistan bases to protect Iranian military assets, that tells me we should be looking maybe for somebody else to mediate. No wonder this damn thing is going nowhere.
Oh, how proper and senatorial. I don't trust Pakistanis as far as I can throw them. This is ridiculous.
Which also speaks to the contempt the U.S. has even for its allies, because the current Pakistani government is very compliant with the U.S.
Yes.
Because...
Okay. Well, we are like compliant. إنه بيقول لك الحكومة الباكستانية دلوقتي متعاونة جدا مع أمريكا.
Because the U.S. helped overthrow the previous leader of Pakistan, Imran Khan. Why? Because he actually was playing a neutral role in...
قال لك ليه بقى الحكومة الحالية مش خبر اسود ده فحطهم كلهم تحت الأتوبيس دلوقتي ده شو everybody under the bus المنطقة بتبتز دلوقتي. لا 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 الله. ليه بقى هم الحكومة الحالية بتاعت باكستان متفاهمة جدا مع أمريكا عشان خاطر أمريكا حاولت ساعدته في إن هم يشيلوا عمران خان أو بغض النظر عن عمران خان اللي كان بيحاولوا بيساعدوا أو بيساعدوا في التمويل لانتخاباته والسيدة اتجوز مع بغض النظر كان مين ماشي كمل.
The proxy war in Ukraine. He was trying to mediate a resolution, much as Pakistan is trying to mediate a resolution now between U.S. and Iran.
كان ليه بقى كان ساعتها المفروض حسب كلامه أو بحثه وتحليله أيا كان إنه ساعتها عمران خان كان محايد وبيحاول يعمل تفاوض أوكرانيا فأمريكا قالت له لا جو المحايدة ده مش هيمشي فقال لك الحكومة الجديدة شلنا لها عمران خان والله ما أعرفش مين موجود دلوقتي عمران خان كان فيه هول عليه كان فيه بروباجندا ماشية كويس عليه في يعني في الناس اللي كانت معناه في المنطقة دي.
Pakistan was neutral when it came to the proxy war in Ukraine. So therefore, according to leaked diplomatic cables, this was reported on by The Intercept a few years ago. They marked Imran Khan for regime change. And now
this is the same Imran Khan who is a world champion cricket player who's now serving a life sentence in a Pakistani prison for trumped-up charges for which he never even had a trial.
قال لك دي عمران خان اللي هو ايه الشامبيون يعني بالعربي في الكريكت اللعبة الباكستانية بيحبوا يلعبوا كريكت حاجة زي بالإيد كده يضربوا الكورة يعني يعني محبوس من غير ما يتحاكم حد.
Exactly. And so Lindsey Graham has such contempt for Pakistan that even when the government results from a U.S.-backed coup, if he can now find an excuse to blow up these talks and blame the mediator Pakistan, he will do that because these talks are a threat to his agenda, which is regime change. And this accusation against Pakistan for hosting Iranian aircraft, whether it's true or not, it's an act of projection because what was the U.S. just caught doing? Enabling an Israeli military base inside of Iraq that was covertly built to support Israeli forces in their attack on Iran. And this is inside a U.S. ally, Iraq. And when Iraqi forces discovered this...
واضح ان الحلفاء كلهم بيتفوزوا دلوقتي. مش المفروض حليفة لأمريكا. أمريكا سمحت للبعض يحطوا معسكر كده من غير ما العراق تعرف. غريبة.
And tried to do something about it. Israel fired on them, and the U.S. backed them up on that. So that's how the U.S. treats their allies. If you're trying to mediate a peace deal to end a war, then you have to undermine, according to Lindsey Graham. And if you're a U.S. ally like Iraq, then yeah, we're going to build a secret military. We're going to help build a secret Israeli military base inside your sovereign territory. And when your own forces discover and try to do something about it, we will back Israel as they fire on you. So it's a real sign of contempt the U.S. has not only for its allies, but also for diplomacy.
Switching gears to Lebanon, is the Lebanon government about to negotiate with the Israelis in Washington this week and again sell out the Lebanon people to whatever Israel wants?
There are these talks going on, and the Lebanese government has been very openly hostile toward Hezbollah, and to the point where they're even willing to meet with Israeli officials, which is in violation of the country's own laws, where you're not supposed to engage with an enemy state like Israel. But this government is incredibly influenced by the U.S. There's a massive U.S. embassy, so-called embassy, in Beirut, one of the biggest in the world, and the U.S. plays a major role there. And the people in power.
أكبر سفارات العالم في بيروت السفارات الأمريكية في بيروت. مالها حكومة لبنان عايزة إيه؟ هتقابل أمريكا تاني عشان
are currently essentially listening to Washington. Lebanon is a very complicated society. It's very divided. You do have a substantial number of people who don't like Hezbollah and don't want to be constantly fighting Israel. But then you also have a huge amount of people who do support Hezbollah because Hezbollah has resisted decades of Israeli aggression and expelled Israeli occupation forces after decades of occupation. And the answer to all this would simply be for Israel to behave like a normal state, stop occupying Palestinians, stop denying them their freedom, stop trying to invade other countries and steal their land as it's done in Lebanon, as it's done in Syria, now also attacking
احنا المفروض الحل الوحيد ان البعض يبطلوا اللي بيعملوه ده. بس انا عماله بتهزف كل ايه حلفاء الولايات المتحده دلوقتي اللي بيتكلموا لغه عربيه او اردو او ايا كان. انت حليفه من كده معلش تضطر تقف في الابتزاز. بس احنا هنوعدك ان احنا هنقول للبعض كخ تعيش كده تاني.
But because the U.S. won't rein Israel in, every other country is in danger. And the answer of the Lebanese government right now is to try to reach some deal with Israel. But look, Israel won't accept anything until Hezbollah is destroyed. And their agenda is to get Lebanon to do it for them, to have essentially a civil war in Lebanon, as has happened before. Because Israel has been finding it can't do it itself. Hezbollah's military power, contrary to many predictions, has remained strong. They're hitting Israeli forces now with drones that have been very effective. So now the Israeli-U.S. strategy is try to enlist Lebanon, the government there, in a civil war against Hezbollah, and essentially return to the days of internal strife where Lebanese were fighting one another. That's the Israeli hope, because Israel can't do it itself.
In light of the research done by Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times in a piece that has infuriated the Israeli Foreign Ministry and produced nonsensical responses, is it fair to conclude that Israeli leadership at the cabinet level and Netanyahu's office are aware of the horrors that go on visited on Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails?
They're absolutely aware. And, I think given the preponderance of cases in which this has happened, that Nicholas Kristof documents, and others have documented this as well, he isn't the first to break the story, but certainly to put it in the New York Times at that level of attention, that is something new. I think it's government policy.
ده جزء من البروباغندا بتاعت البعض إنه يخوفوا اللي حواليه. That's it. Too much to.
If something happens enough times, it's part of a pattern. It's systematic. And from the testimonies that Christoph assembled and other sources, it's very clear that this is what Israeli forces are trained to do. And certainly it's tolerated at a very high level. I mean, you had in Israel rallies in support of soldiers who were credibly accused of rape. And they're treated as heroes. They go on national television and brag about it. So if normal Israelis who go out and rally in support of the rapists know about it, and certainly top Israeli officials do. And I mean, there's so many questions about the story. First of all, why is this published on the op-ed page of the New York Times and not in the news section? The news section of the New York Times years ago published a fraud called Screams Without Words, which accused Hamas of systemic rape on October 7th. Even though if you look at all the evidence they tried to put forward, it crumbles one by one, including the fact that the cover image for the story on the front page of the New York Times, because this is a news story, was of an Israeli family, supposedly like the relatives of an Israeli rape victim. The problem is the family themselves said there's no way she was raped because we spoke to her right before she died on October 2nd. So the image for the New York Times of an Israeli rape victim wasn't even a rape victim, which speaks to the fraudulence of that Hamas rape story. And the fact that they put that in the news section, front page years ago, and now years later we get this in the op-ed section, it speaks to how the New York Times has done a terrible job. And Nick Kristof has done something important, even though his story also propagates the false Hamas rape narrative. He has spoken to Palestinians. Unlike the October 7th stories, he has direct testimony from actual victims. The October 7th stories didn't, which is another very big difference. But yes, this absolutely is government policy inside of Israel.
Aaron, thank you very much, my dear friend. Great analysis, and congratulations on your unique, should be front page of the New York Times, and should have been at the time front page of the New York Times, research and reporting on the chemical weapon controversy in Syria. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you, Judge. It's another case where the damage is done and the truth comes out way later. Regime change was achieved in Syria. The allegation that Assad's chemical weapons was integral to that narrative is what justified the regime change war. It's what justified sanctions that decimated Syria. And it was used, by the way, to help pave the way for a war of aggression on Iran. Because before you attack Iran, you have to take out their allies. And taking out Syria was a key part of that progress.
Thank you, my man. All the best.
Good to see you. Thank you, Judge.
Sure. Coming up, if you're watching us live in 34 minutes, on the Robert Kagan and Nicholas Kristof articles. And the Kagan...
Okay. So الشك براكب ايه؟ well الشك براكب خافوا من البعد، ابتزاز الحلفاء، و لا إله إلا الله وإيه، ولغز غامض في ألمانيا دلوقتي. بس I'm good. I'm out.